Alright, happy Easter to you guys. Well, you'll be seeing this way late, but today, 2010 Dodge Journey. Steering wheel shaking bad when you're pressing the brakes, so pretty good indicator the brakes are bad. Also, you feel pulsation on the brake pedal when you press it, so I'll pull it in and we'll get to it. What kind of chalk blocks under, just to make sure it doesn't go rolling away. Never worked on a Dodge Journey before. But cars are basically all the same. And make sure I got parts for this. It's interesting. I don't know if they bought rotors and everything too, which is good. But I didn't see any pads in there, so before I even get started, I want to take a look and see what's in here. Well, I guess that's good, new rotors, but doesn't do a whole lot of good if we don't have pads. Yeah, I found them. They were tucked up under the seat. But I'm glad they got new rotors, because with the way that thing was sounding, it doesn't sound real good. So, good. I'll always check and make sure you have all the parts first. Now I'll get going. I think I'll do driver's side first. Looks like my pup's gonna help me today. So I got the wheels chalked up, and I'll jack it up, throw jack stands under it. Alright, jacks are for lifting, jack stands are for supporting the vehicle. So I'm just going to show you guys one side to save time, and the other side's the exact same. There's nothing that's different left to right. It's possible there's differences from front to back, but left to right should be the same. Like I said, 2010 Dodge Journey. I guess the lug nuts are probably standard and everything else is metric. Yeah, like the rotors actually look somewhat decent or thick enough. So there looks like there's enough material, and actually there'll be a specification that says once these have wore down so much you have to replace them. The outside looks good. There's no deep gouges or anything. But I feel on the back side, I feel some deep gouges. So hopefully in the caliper that the piston actually hasn't wore all the way through the pad and into the disc rotor itself, because if that happens then you got to replace the caliper as well. So almost always there's 4 bolts that hold these on. 2 hold the bracket and assembly for the caliper in place, and then 2 bolts will hold kind of just the piston assembly in place, and we can rotate that out of the way, replace the pads, and put it back together if we're just doing brake pads. But since we're doing the rotor too, we'll remove everything so we can get the disc off and put a new one back on. But so we have to take off both these. So before I take this all apart, I'll also disconnect the piston in its whole assembly, because it moves back and forth from the bracket. So I'll just take these partially the way out for now. Sometimes these discs or rotors will have a set screw in them that holds the disc to the hub, but it doesn't look like this has it, which is good. I really think after an oil change, this is probably the next easiest thing to do for, you know, do-it-yourself maintenance, because you're going to get charged some pretty decent money for a brake job. I'll show you guys what I'm taking apart here in a minute. So if we look at the inside here, this is one of the bolts that I took out for the brackets, and the other one is, that's the other bracket for the bolt, or for the the brackets that hold it on, and then I'm removing these, a bolt here and a bolt on bottom here that hold basically the caliper assembly in place. So I'll pop those, or these two out. I'll tie up my caliper so it doesn't hang on the rubber hose. We don't want to stress this out, so I'll grab some wire. We'll wrap it around and hang it from the spring. And then I'll take the bracket off, throw the new rotor on, throw some new pads in it, press the piston back, and then go from there. So if at all possible when you're doing a brake job, it's always best to never actually have to bleed the brakes, especially if it's got ABS. So to actually fire the ABS system, you either have to go out on the road and slam on the brakes to get the ABS to push the air out, or you have to have the computer to cycle the ABS, which is just like an electronic way of turning the brakes on and off. If that gets air in it, then it makes it hard to bleed. But if you don't have to, that's best. So a lot of times these are made too, if you look, like these will flip down. Change the brake pads out without having to remove the whole caliper or anything, but we got to take this all apart anyway. So you can see how bad of a grooves it's gotten there. I mean, that's terrible. So hopefully we look at the backside, and there was plenty of material there, but gosh, I don't know why there's such a bad groove in it. It's a pretty uneven wear. This one looks fine, but when you replace them, you can't just replace one side. They're sold in sets. So those two bolts actually thread into a slider that allows the caliper to move back and forth. So as the pistons expand and contract, it's got to move the whole assembly. Otherwise, the only pad that would wear would be the one on your piston side, because it pushes out. So what happens here is that it actually allows it to squeeze and press from both sides. But typically you see it wear out on the inside sooner. Okay, I got the bracket off. I mean, there's really nothing to do here. We'll pop out and put in, I think it's got new clips for it. I'll double check before I take these out. And those are just to hold it in place, so you don't get a rattling and the brake pads making noise or squealing. It's not a bad idea to throw a little bit of grease on these, but they're already lubricated, just so they move back and forth freely. Because if they stick, that's where sometimes you'll get uneven wear on one pad or the other, because it's now not allowing that caliper to move back and forth. I'll go grab some wire or zip tie and hold that up. And it's just good practice, even though it's only going to take me a few seconds to bolt that back on. I don't want this to fall and jar that hose, and you can put a kink in them, or there's all sorts of things that can happen. There we go, so hung up out of the way, I can easily work. This might be a little stubborn. Disc off. Disc is off, and if you guys can see, it has got some horrible grooves in it. So either something got caught in there, or I don't know why, because there's plenty of material left on this pad, but it's weird how it wore in different areas. So it's almost like something got in between the brake pad and the disc. So grab the new one, put it in, putting brakes on. So I'm just going to grab two pads, the keepers and the roller. So I'm going to try not to touch these, because any bit of oil is going to contaminate them. You should wipe them down. Some new clips, perfect. New disc. And I'll spray it down with brake clean when I'm all done, so I don't get any oil and prematurely wear out a pad. go. Fits perfect, looks good. Now it's possible that the pads came with clips too. I'm just gonna double check to make sure they're the same. I probably could pop these out before I put it back in. Pretty easy to get to. But have new ones, you might as well put them in. And these should go on. You see there's one end that's like got spring tension on it, the other one's just a flat side. Flat side should always go towards the caliper or towards the disc, because if you put this side first, it's possible it can hit the disc as the pad wears. There is special things on the pad that are wear indicators. That's why you hear that screeching noise when it's time to change your brakes. And if you don't, or if you ignore it and don't change them, then that turns into a different squealing noise that's usually metal on metal. That's bad, because then when that happens you have to replace everything. So I'm going to look and see if these pads look the same, left to right, top to bottom. And if I look, it's the same part number. I'll check on these. Same part number, so I don't have to worry about putting a brake pad in the wrong spot. So one side I put down in that slot that I put on. Oh, so I'm going to tighten this down right now before I go any further. Alright, I'm going to tighten my bracket down. Then I'll install the pads. This lighting kind of. Okay, new pads going in. This is the wear indicator. So what happens as this wears? Right here, that tab, so the pad wears down, and once it hits that tab hits your rotor and starts to make a squealing noise, really high vibration. So then you know it's time to change out your pads, and you should do it right away, because that's not a lot of material left, and if you go further, then you're going to end up by having to replace rotors too. I just noticed there is a left and right to these clips. One side has a little ear, the other side does not. So if maybe I can show you a close up here. So one side has this ear on it, the other side doesn't. So some of them are one way, some are the other way. So this one over here, can't even see it myself. That one it doesn't matter, but on the back side it does, because otherwise it wouldn't hit over here. Alright, continuing on. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the caliper back on. The only problem is that now we put new brake pads in there, and now they went from being, you know, this thin to being this thick. So now we have to press that piston back in the bore. Well, they make special tools for this too, so hopefully I have mine here. So this tool is used to press it back in. You can use a C-clamp too, but some of these you have to rotate and push the piston at the same time. So we'll cut our caliper free and take a look at it. The reason I can tell, like, if one needs to spin in or not, if it needs to spin in as you're pushing it, it'll have a little knob on it like that. So this one's just a regular old push it back in place, so I can use a C-clamp. So this part sits right in here, and that's what it uses to press against and push the piston back in. It's kind of weird, you have to thread it on or fit it on from the back. Oh yeah, and this is magnetic too, so things stick on there, which I don't really want. Let's see here. And you can use them backwards too, so it has a notch in there for if I have to spin it back in, but if I don't have to spin it, I can just use the flat side, so I don't have to send my full reach of this thing all the way in there. There's no risk of pushing it too far back because that piston can only go back so far. Should check and see if there's... It's possible for that fluid level to get pushed back. You know, if someone's brakes aren't working properly, they're extended all the way, they keep adding fluid. Well then, if they've topped it off and then you go to push the cylinder back in, that brake fluid's going to travel back up to the reservoir. And it's a fair amount of brake fluid. I mean, it's possible you could have it overfull. I'm not exactly sure where I left off on the other one. My camera died. Besides gone way years. The one thing that's really weird is the bolt holding the caliper on right here was 9/16, not ½ inch on this side. So I don't know why they switched sizes, but there's probably a reason for it. And looking at these bolts that held the caliper to the bracket, had Loctite on them, so I put a little bit of Loctite on there as well. Torque them down. Test drive. Check the brakes a couple of times before I get going too fast. There's nothing I can hit besides my own fence posts. You should never like slam on the brakes when you have new brakes either. Oh, turn off the radio. It's not good for them. So drive them normally. I know some people like to, you know, get on there and really test them hard, but that's not a good idea. Brake and see if we get any steering wheel shake here. Nothing. Brakes nice and straight. Maybe a little to the right, but definitely no more shaking. Yep. A little bit faster just to see how the brakes respond. No noise, no shaking, no pulsation in the brakes, so it's good to go. Acceleration test. That's unnecessary, but yeah, everything's good to go. I'm gonna go return it right now. See you in the next one.